Why do I feel so exhausted even after 8 hours of sleep? Why is my memory not as sharp as it used to be? Why am I losing strength even though I still exercise regularly? If you've ever asked yourself any of these questions, you're not alone. These aren't just random signs of aging. They're your body's cry for help, signals that something deeper is off. And no, it's not just about getting older. It's often about what your body is missing. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 specific vitamins backed by decades of research that can fundamentally shift how you age: vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and vitamin B12. These aren't trendy supplements. They're essential for regulating the very systems that keep your heart strong, your brain sharp, and your energy steady. Stay with me, because I'll also share a real story of a retired nurse who reversed early cognitive decline by fixing one simple deficiency. If you care about living better, not just longer, this might be the most important health advice you hear all year. Aging isn't just about wrinkles or fatigue. It's the silent breakdown of your body systems. Deep inside, your cells face oxidative stress, inflammation, and declining hormone signals. Your mitochondria weaken, your blood vessels stiffen, and your brain cells struggle to stay sharp. This doesn't happen overnight. It builds up slowly, often fueled by hidden deficiencies in key nutrients like vitamin D3, K2, and B12. These vitamins don't just support your health. They regulate the very systems that keep you functional. Aging is the loss of cellular resilience. But with the right tools, you can slow that decline and age with strength and clarity. Number 1, vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is often misunderstood as just another supplement on the shelf, but in reality, it functions more like a hormone than a vitamin. Structurally similar to steroid hormones like testosterone and cortisol, vitamin D3 plays a central role in regulating gene expression, immune activity, calcium absorption, inflammation, and even brain health. It affects over 1,000 genes across nearly every tissue in the body. When sunlight hits your skin, specifically UVB radiation, it triggers a reaction that ultimately helps your body synthesize vitamin D3. However, modern life has virtually erased this natural process. Most Americans spend their days indoors, under artificial light, covered in clothes, or slathered in sunscreen. As a result, vitamin D deficiency has become widespread. According to data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, NANS, approximately 42% of U.S. adults are deficient in vitamin D, with even higher rates in older adults, people with darker skin, and those living in northern latitudes. And here's the problem. The symptoms of D3 deficiency are subtle at first: low energy, muscle weakness, poor sleep, mood issues. But over time, low D3 levels contribute to a cascade of system-wide breakdowns that accelerate aging. Let's take a look at how. 1. Cardiovascular health. Vitamin D3 is critical to heart health. Low levels are linked to high blood pressure, increased arterial stiffness, and greater risk of heart attacks and strokes. One study published in the American Journal of Cardiology found that patients with low vitamin D levels had a 60% higher risk of cardiovascular events. This isn't just correlation, it's about inflammation. Vitamin D helps suppress pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha, both known to contribute to vascular damage. Deficiency leads to endothelial dysfunction, the very first step in atherosclerosis. 2. Immune regulation and inflammation. D3 is vital to your immune system. It helps your body distinguish between real threats and false alarms, reducing the risk of chronic inflammation. In autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and even type 1 diabetes, patients often show significantly lower levels of vitamin D. For older adults, maintaining proper D3 levels has been shown to reduce the risk of respiratory infections and even improve vaccine responses. 3. Bone and muscle integrity. Everyone knows vitamin D is important for calcium absorption and bone strength. But what's less known is that it also plays a direct role in muscle function. D3 interacts with receptors in muscle cells, helping regulate strength and coordination. Studies show that older adults with sufficient vitamin D have better balance and fewer falls. Without enough, bones weaken and muscles become frail, setting the stage for fractures, disability, and a loss of independence. 4. Cognitive health and Alzheimer's disease. Low vitamin D levels are associated with a higher risk of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. A meta-analysis in neurology found that older adults with severe D deficiency had a 122% increased risk of developing dementia. One reason is that vitamin D helps clear amyloid beta plaques in the brain and reduces oxidative stress in neurons. Another reason may be its role in vascular health. Since the brain relies heavily on blood flow, anything that stiffens arteries also starves the brain. 5. Metabolic function and type 2 diabetes. Vitamin D receptors are found in pancreatic beta cells, where insulin is produced. Several studies show that vitamin D improves insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism. A 2019 review in Diabetes Care found that people with the lowest D3 levels were more likely to develop insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome, conditions that not only increase diabetes risk but also accelerate biological aging. Robert was an active 67-year-old retiree from Michigan who stayed indoors most of the year. He complained of fatigue, back pain, and mood swings. Blood tests revealed his 25-OH-D level was just 18 nanograms per milliliter, well below the optimal range. His doctor recommended 4,000 IU of vitamin D3 daily along with 200 micrograms of K2 to prevent calcium misplacement. Within 8 weeks, Robert reported improved mood, fewer body aches, and more energy. His labs showed a rise to 48 nanograms per milliliter, within the ideal zone for cardiovascular and neurological protection. Number 2, vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 may be one of the most overlooked keys to aging well. While vitamin D3 gets plenty of attention, K2 often flies under the radar. Yet it plays a critical role in managing one of the body's most important elements, calcium. And it's not about how much calcium you get. It's about where that calcium ends up. That's what makes vitamin K2 so essential. It acts like a biological traffic cop, directing calcium to the right places, your bones and teeth, and keeping it out of the wrong places, your arteries, kidneys, and soft tissues. Most people confuse vitamin K1 with K2. K1 helps with blood clotting and is found in leafy greens like spinach and kale. But K2, specifically the -7 Malawian Quatches form, does something entirely different. It activates 2 key proteins, osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein, MGP. Osteocalcin helps bind calcium into your bones, improving density and strength. MGP prevents calcium from hardening your arteries. Without enough K2, these proteins remain inactive and calcium floats freely in your bloodstream, where it can do serious damage over time. Let's start with your arteries. Vascular calcification, the buildup of calcium in blood vessel walls, is a strong predictor of heart disease and stroke. It doesn't cause symptoms early on, but over time, it makes arteries stiff and less responsive. This increases blood pressure and reduces blood flow to critical organs. In one of the most cited studies on this topic, the Rotterdam study, over 4,800 older adults were followed for 10 years. Those with the highest dietary intake of vitamin K2 had a 52% lower risk of arterial calcification and were 50% less likely to die from heart disease. That's not a small difference. That's the kind of long-term impact you want when thinking about healthy aging. Now let's talk bones. As we age, bone density naturally declines, especially in postmenopausal women. Osteoporosis isn't just a bone problem. It's a life-threatening condition. A hip fracture after age 70 has a 1-year mortality rate as high as 30%. Not because of the fracture itself, but due to complications like infections, loss of mobility, and cascading system failure. This is where K2 becomes a double win. By activating osteocalcin, it supports bone mineralization, making your bones stronger and more resilient. And here's the key. Calcium alone doesn't do this. In fact, many studies show that calcium supplements, when taken without K2, increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. Why? Because calcium without direction can deposit in arteries instead of bones. It's like pouring concrete without a blueprint. That's why pairing vitamin D3 with K2 is crucial. D3 increases calcium absorption, and K2 tells it where to go. Margaret, a 72-year-old grandmother from Ohio, had been taking calcium and vitamin D for years after a bone scan showed early osteoporosis. But when she started experiencing chest tightness and her doctor found elevated coronary calcium on a CT scan, she was shocked. She had done everything right, or so she thought. What her doctor never mentioned was vitamin K2. After consulting a functional medicine practitioner, she began taking 200 micrograms of negative 7 malowing quatches daily along with D3 and magnesium. Over the next 18 months, her bone density stabilized, and repeat imaging showed a halt in her arterial calcification progression. This story isn't rare. It's becoming more common as people discover how K2 fills the missing link between bone and cardiovascular health. Why is K2 deficiency so common? Unlike K1, which is abundant in leafy greens, K2 is harder to get from diet, especially in the U.S. Traditional sources include natto, fermented soybeans, extremely high in negative 7 malowing quatches, but not popular in the West. Aged cheeses like Gouda or Brie, grass-fed meat, and egg yolks. The problem is most Americans eat very little of these, and the modern diet, filled with processed, calcium-fortified foods, actually increases the risk of calcium buildup in soft tissue without providing the cofactors to regulate it. Because there's no standard lab test for vitamin K2 status, many people are deficient and don't even know it. You won't feel a K2 deficiency like you might with B12 or D3. It's silent, and its consequences, like artery hardening and brittle bones, can take decades to show up. Number 3. Vitamin B12. Vitamin B12, also known as cobalamin, is one of the most underestimated nutrients in aging. Yet its impact spans nearly every critical system in the human body. From your brain and nerves to your red blood cells and mitochondria, B12 is essential for staying sharp, energized, and functional as you age. Unlike many vitamins that support broad metabolic health, B12's role is highly specific and deeply impactful. Without it, the machinery of your body begins to misfire, slowly, silently, and often irreversibly. Let's break down why this vitamin is so vital, especially after age 50. B12 plays a central role in protecting and regenerating the nervous system. It's required for the production of myelin, the protective sheath around your nerves that allows fast, accurate communication between the brain and body. When B12 levels fall, this sheath degrades, leading to nerve damage. The result? Tingling in the hands and feet, balance problems, burning sensations, even impaired reflexes. In more advanced cases, a deficiency can contribute to peripheral neuropathy, cognitive impairment, and even dementia. A landmark study published in Neurology found that low or even low normal B12 levels were associated with increased white matter lesions in the brain, strong predictors of cognitive decline and memory loss. Many people don't associate brain fog, forgetfulness, or depression with B12, but they should. B12 is a critical cofactor in the methylation cycle, which influences neurotransmitter production, like serotonin and dopamine, gene expression, and detoxification. Without proper methylation, your brain chemistry becomes unstable. The consequences can include mood swings, slow processing speed, poor memory, trouble concentrating. In the famous Framingham offspring study, adults with low B12 scored significantly lower on memory and learning tests, even when their levels were within the so-called normal range. One of the most misunderstood symptoms of B12 deficiency is fatigue. But the connection is straightforward. B12 is involved in the conversion of food into ADP, your body's usable energy. Specifically, it supports the Krebs cycle, a series of mitochondrial reactions that fuel every cell. B12 also supports red blood cell production. Without it, your blood can't efficiently transport oxygen throughout the body, leading to anemia and low energy. But what's critical is that these problems often begin before anemia shows up. That's why many people with B12 deficiency are misdiagnosed or ignored, because their hemoglobin levels still look fine on a standard blood test. Why B12 deficiency is common. Absorbing B12 is not simple. It requires multiple steps. Stomach acid separates B12 from food. Intrinsic factor, a protein made in the stomach, binds to B12. This complex is then absorbed in the small intestine. This process can break down for several reasons. Age. Stomach acid production declines after age 50. Medications. Proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux and metformin for diabetes interfere with absorption. Gut disorders. Conditions like celiac, Crohn's, or bacterial overgrowth can impair the intestines. Vegan and vegetarian diets. Since B12 is found almost exclusively in animal products, liver, shellfish, eggs, and red meat, plant-based eaters are especially vulnerable. According to the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, up to 20% of older adults may have marginal B12 levels, often without symptoms until significant damage has occurred. James, a 65-year-old former engineer from Arizona, had been experiencing balance issues and forgetfulness. His doctor initially suspected early Parkinson's or mild cognitive impairment, but blood work showed a serum B12 level of 260 pg/ml, technically within the normal range. However, additional testing revealed elevated methylmalonic acid, MMA, and homocysteine, classic signs of functional B12 deficiency. He began supplementing with 1,000 micrograms of methylcobalamin daily. Within 6 weeks, his gait improved, the numbness in his feet subsided, and his memory noticeably sharpened. He later called B12 his brain fuel. Standard B12 blood tests can be misleading. You can have a level in the low normal range, 200 to 400 pg/ml, and still be deficient at the cellular level. That's why functional markers are more reliable. Methylmalonic acid, MMA, elevated when B12 is too low for mitochondria to function properly. Homocysteine, elevated levels increase cardiovascular and brain disease risk and can result from low B12, folate, or B6. For optimal function, most experts suggest serum B12 above 500 pg/ml, MMA within normal range, homocysteine below 10 mol/L. Aging well isn't about magic pills or reversing time. It's about making informed, strategic choices that support your body's core systems. As we've seen, vitamins D3, K2, and B12 are not optional. They're foundational to preventing the most common drivers of aging: inflammation, vascular damage, cognitive decline, and metabolic dysfunction. Vitamin D3 acts like a hormone, regulating immune function, gene expression, and bone integrity. Vitamin K2 ensures calcium goes to your bones, not your arteries. Vitamin B12 protects your brain, supports nerve function, and fuels your mitochondria. Together, these 3 nutrients form a triad that supports long-term health span, the years of life you spend fully functional, independent, and engaged. So here's your longevity blueprint. Get tested. Don't guess. Check your levels of D3, B12, homocysteine, and MMA. Supplement smartly. Use high-quality D3, -7 Malawian kwacha's K2, and methylcobalamin B12, along with magnesium and folate as needed. Support with lifestyle. Prioritize strength training, whole food nutrition, restorative sleep, and sunlight exposure. Longevity isn't about avoiding death. It's about maximizing life. And with the right tools, you can build a future where aging doesn't mean decline, but strength, clarity, and purpose. Start today. Your future self will thank you.